£90, that's $106 for this NH34 powered GMT with a ceramic bezel insert, and very nice bezel action as well, with pretty much perfect alignment, solid end links, solid links, screw pins, a sliding on the fly adjustment system in the clasp, screw down crown, screw down case back, nicely finished. Yeah, there's not a lot to dislike about this watch, but there was one specification that I called into question when I reviewed this watch recently. That is the water resistance rating, 200 meters of water resistance rating. And the reason I'm a little bit dubious on this occasion is because, well, it's got a piece of mineral crystal in the back. And so that is just another point of failure. And in order for it to withstand 200 meters of pressure, that piece of crystal needs to be pretty substantial. Now, I do have Herman. Here he is. He's been resurrected from the box down there. Herman is a water pressure tester. Unfortunately, Herman can only test this watch up to the equivalent of 60 meters below the surface of the water. So we can't test it down to essentially 200 meters. But it's still going to give us some indication as to whether or not this piece of mineral crystal in the back of the watch is going to compromise the water resistance capabilities of this watch. I'm going to test this watch in 3 different ways. Now, this first test I'm going to do is a nice simple one. I'm just going to submerge the watch in water. I haven't adjusted or tested the case back at all. It's literally as it was when I received the watch. Of course, I have undone the crown and put some power into the NH34. Undone the crown up exactly as I would any other watch. So yeah, I'm going to submerge it for 10 minutes or so, then we'll check for condensation in the watch. Right, we've had closer to 15 minutes, so I think that's long enough. I'm now going to pull the watch out, dry it off, but then I'm going to put a piece of, well, it's actually a sort of plastic ice cube. It's one of these things. It's actually filled with ice, and yeah, I'm going to put that on the crystal and we'll check for excess condensation. Now, we are potentially going to get some condensation because all watches have air inside them and all air has moisture in it. So whenever you cool the crystal like this, you will get some condensation potentially on the inside of the crystal. That is very normal. And then when the watch warms back up, it will disappear. But what we're looking for here is excess condensation. Right, that's been a minute or so. Let's just remove the ice block. And, well, we've got a bit of water on there, obviously, and it feels cold. But I'm actually not seeing any condensation in there. So, yeah, I'm happy this watch has passed a very simple submersion test. Right, let's now move on to test number 2. It's a fairly safe test, although it's a little bit more risky, I think, than the previous one. I'm going to put the watch inside the cylinder, do up the lid, and then add some pressure to the cylinder while the watch is out the water. It's going to be up here still. What that's going to do is force extra air into the watch if there is a breach. I'm then going to drop the watch into the water, and I'm going to let the pressure out. And if there is excessive amounts of bubbles coming from the watch, then there could well be a leak. Now, it is quite normal to get some bubbles because you'll have air trapped inside of the spring bars and underneath the rotating bezel and potentially in between the crown and the crown guards. So there will be some bubbles, but we'll know for sure whether or not there's been a breach. Oh, there we go. That is maximum pressure for this machine. It's rated to the equivalent of 60 meters below the surface of the water, and that is actually quite hard work. I suspect the pressure in there is quite intense. Right, let's drop the watch inside the water and release the pressure and see what happens. We're getting some bubbles from the spring bars, which is to be expected, and there's a bubble there next to the crown, which again, that is also expected, but I'm not seeing the sorts of numbers of bubbles that I would expect to see if excessive amounts of air had been forced into the watch. I've done this test quite a few times, and 20 odd bubbles is actually, for a watch like this with a rotating bezel, 20 odd bubbles is actually quite normal. So at the moment, it looks to me anyway like this watch has passed another test. Right, the next test is basically to leave the watch inside the water and then increase the pressure again and leave it for some time. And yeah, this is the most risky test because, of course, you're going to be essentially forcing water into the watch and, well, into the movement if there is a breach or a problem. But, you know, it's worth doing for this watch, I think. And again, we're only testing it down to the equivalent of 60 meters, but I'm going to leave the watch in there for a good 10 or 15 minutes. And then we'll do the ice block test again. Right, that's been around 10 minutes. So let's just turn the watch around because we can see the front of the watch looks, well, absolutely fine. I'm not seeing any water in there. Now, the case back, there does appear to be a bubble or something in the bottom right-hand corner of the case back. So is that an indication of a breach? Potentially. Let's let the pressure out and do the condensation test again and see what happens. Well, I'm not seeing any evidence of a leak in the front, but there's definitely some water there, look, on the inside of the case back. Right, I'm officially calling it. This watch has unfortunately failed the last 60-meter water resistance test. Funnily enough, had I just done the first two tests and left it at that, we'd have all been very happy. The last test is probably the most telling because you are essentially forcing water into any weaknesses. But actually, the middle test is the official test. That is how Herman is supposed to test watches. And after that test, we would have concluded, yes, it withstood 60 meters of pressure, or the equivalent of 60 meters of pressure. But that extra test at the end, which does put this watch at risk, it's still working absolutely fine. There was just a tiny amount of water inside the case, and that can be removed very easily, and I will do that at some point. But yeah, that last test has basically found a weakness in this watch that we may not have otherwise found. So I'm a little bit disappointed. I'm a little bit surprised. But interestingly, had I bought this watch with the solid stainless steel case back, which, you know, they do offer to sell this watch with that solid stainless steel case back, it wouldn't have failed. Again, we'd have done all three tests and would have left those tests feeling very good about this watch. So yeah, I'm a little bit disappointed that they're still rating this watch with the mineral crystal case back as a 200-meter watch, because it isn't. But I do think you could swim with this watch because, you know, 60 meters of pressure for a sustained period of time is not the same as swimming. It's quite a bit more of a test. So yeah, I would happily swim with this watch, but I wouldn't go snorkeling and I wouldn't go diving with it. And it is, let's not forget, a GMT watch. It's not a diver. They should have just rated it at 50 meters or 100 meters, and we'd have all been happy with that, wouldn't we? If you've bought it with the display case back, swim with it perhaps, but no more. And if you've bought it with the solid stainless steel case back, again, maybe swimming, a little bit of shallow snorkeling, I suspect it will be absolutely fine. But still, come on, Tandorio, let's not give these watches a 200-meter water resistance rating when they are clearly not. If that seal between the crystal and the caseback hadn't failed, had I been able to test this watch up to 200 meters, I suspect the crystal in the caseback would have cracked. That's actually what I thought was going to happen, if anything. So yeah, there you go. Right, guys, I hope that was useful. Thanks again for watching. Let me know in the comment section what you think of this video.